Dear listener, let us take a breath, not merely to inhale and exhale, but to become aware of the breath itself. In that simple awareness, something subtle begins to shift. You are no longer merely existing, you are aware of existing. And that is the beginning. The illusion of the self, what we might call the false identity, is not something we consciously choose, yet it becomes the foundation of how we experience life. It is constructed silently and gradually from early childhood, as we begin to identify with names, roles, and labels. The moment someone says, "You are a good child," or "You are a failure," a part of the mind begins to weave these words into a self-image. We learn to associate who we are with how others respond to us, how we perform, and how we appear. This process is rarely questioned, and over time, this constructed self becomes so familiar that we believe it is us. This false identity is made up of thought. It is a mental structure composed of memory, imagination, and interpretation. It feeds on the past and projects into the future. It says, "I am what happened to me," or "I will be someone if I achieve this." Notice how thought always tries to define you in terms of form, possessions, career, body, relationships, social position. Yet all these things are temporary. They change, decay, come and go. What happens then when the thing you've identified with disappears? The pain you feel is not only the loss of the object, it is the unraveling of the identity you tied to it. This is why there is so much suffering in human experience. The false identity clings to things that are inherently unstable. It resists change, fears endings, and is constantly seeking something to add to itself. It says, "I will be complete when I find the right partner," or "I will be worthy when I reach a certain status." But no matter how much it acquires, it never rests. There is always a sense of incompleteness, of needing more. That is the hallmark of a self built on illusion. It can never be fulfilled because it is not real. We often assume this sense of self is solid and consistent, but if you observe closely, you'll notice it shifts depending on circumstances. One moment you may feel confident, and the next insecure. One day you're praised, and you feel elevated. The next day you're criticized, and you feel diminished. Who is the you that is rising and falling with every opinion, every situation? This instability reveals something crucial. The self you believe in is reactive, dependent, and impermanent. There is a deeper intelligence in you that notices all of this. There is a quiet space of awareness that sees the fluctuation without being caught in it. That awareness is not part of the false identity, it is prior to it. It does not need to be constructed, it simply is. But because we are so habituated to identifying with thought and emotion, we overlook this deeper presence. The mind is noisy, filled with commentary and judgments. It constantly reinforces the idea of a separate self, a self in need of defending, proving, or fixing. To begin to see through the false identity is not to reject the mind or the personality. It is to become aware of them as phenomena, useful in practical life, but not the essence of who you are. When you begin to observe your thoughts and emotions as passing movements rather than permanent truths, a space opens within you. In that space, you are no longer the character in the story, you are the awareness of the story itself. This shift is subtle but profound. It marks the beginning of awakening. The false identity no longer has to be fought or suppressed. It simply becomes transparent, like mist dissolving in morning sunlight. What remains is a sense of stillness, clarity, and presence. And from that presence, you begin to touch something timeless, something that was never born and can never die. Divine awareness is not a distant goal to be reached through striving or accumulation of knowledge. It is not something you need to create, improve, or earn. It is, in truth, already present within you, but it lies dormant beneath layers of mental noise, identification with form, and the compulsion to define yourself through doing. The doorway to divine awareness opens not through doing more, but through being fully present. Presence is simple, yet it is the most overlooked aspect of our experience. It cannot be grasped by the mind because it is not a concept. It is a direct experience, the felt sense of being here, now, without resistance, without interpretation. It arises when the incessant mental commentary quiets, even for a moment, and a stillness within you begins to emerge. In that stillness, something sacred begins to reveal itself, not as a belief, but as a living reality. To become present is to turn your attention away from the endless movement of thought and into the aliveness of this very moment. You do not need to change what is happening. You simply need to be aware that it is happening. The breath enters and leaves the body. Sensations arise and pass. Sounds come and go. Thoughts may still appear, but you are no longer lost in them. You are the space in which they appear. This space, this awareness, is not bound by your personal identity. It does not care what your name is, what you've done, or what you hope to become. It is untouched by success or failure. It sees without judgment, and it accepts without condition. When you rest in this awareness, even briefly, a profound peace begins to arise, not the peace of quiet surroundings, but the peace of no resistance. It is a peace that has no opposite. Divine awareness is often misunderstood because it cannot be understood by the mind. The mind wants to grasp, define, and categorize. It wants a technique, a path, a system. But divine awareness cannot be entered through effort. It unfolds naturally when effort ceases and attention returns to the simplicity of now. In presence, the seeker and the sought disappear. There is just being. What blocks this awareness is not something external. It is the tendency to identify with thought, emotion, and form, as if they are the totality of who you are. But the moment you realize, even faintly, that you are not the thinker but the awareness behind the thought, a shift occurs. You begin to awaken from the dream of separation. You see that the one observing the mind is not separate from the source of life itself. This realization is not loud. It does not come with drama or intensity. It is quiet, gentle, and deeply intimate. It often arises in the pauses, in the silence between thoughts, in the stillness between actions. In these gaps, you begin to taste the timeless, and what you find there is not something foreign or unfamiliar. It is who you have always been beneath the layers of mental conditioning. To live from this awareness is not to withdraw from the world. It is to meet the world with clarity and openness, free from the compulsion to defend, prove, or possess. Action still happens, relationships still unfold, but they are no longer driven by fear or egoic desire. They arise from a place of wholeness. Life is no longer a means to an end. Each moment becomes the end itself. And in that, there is great beauty, depth, and grace. You are no longer seeking the divine. You are the awareness in which the divine is known. The journey from false identity to divine awareness is not a linear path, nor is it one of struggle and self-improvement. It is, rather, a process of shedding, of allowing, of softening into the truth that has always been quietly present beneath the noise of the mind. This transformation does not require effort in the way the ego understands effort. It does not demand striving, achieving, or becoming someone new. It invites us into stillness, into silence, into the vast, unmoving awareness that is already here. Stillness is not the absence of sound or motion in the external world. It is the inner quiet that arises when we are no longer resisting the present moment. It is the natural state that reveals itself when we stop chasing after thoughts or pushing away emotions. It is the ground of being that remains untouched no matter what is happening on the surface. In this stillness, something within us begins to open not as a concept, but as a felt sense of presence, a knowing without words. This inner stillness is not something you need to create. It is revealed when you stop identifying with the mind's constant commentary. The mind is always looking for the next thing, the next idea, the next solution, the next identity, but the truth of who you are is not found in movement. It is discovered in the pause, in the space where thought dissolves and being is all that remains. In that space there is no sense of me as separate from life. There is only awareness, witnessing, and peace. The ego, the false identity, cannot understand stillness. It fears it, because in stillness the ego begins to dissolve. It cannot survive without noise, without conflict, without some sense of I am this and I am not that. But when you enter stillness willingly, even for a brief moment, you see that you are not the ego at all. You are not the thinker, not the doer. You are the awareness in which all thinking and doing appear, and this realization is the beginning of freedom. Freedom does not come from having control over everything. It comes from seeing clearly that you are not bound by anything. Even your thoughts, your emotions, your history, they arise within you, but they do not define you. You are the space in which they come and go. This recognition is not dramatic. It is quiet. It arrives like a gentle breeze through an open window, but its effect is profound. The weight of identification begins to lift, and what remains is lightness. Openness, stillness. From this stillness, transformation unfolds naturally. There is no need to push or force change. When the false self is no longer being reinforced, it begins to fall away on its own. Patterns of fear, anxiety, and control lose their grip. They no longer find a home in you, and what emerges is not a new identity, but the formless awareness that has been patiently waiting, like the sky behind the clouds. In this space of divine awareness, you begin to see the world differently. You are no longer reacting from unconscious patterns, but responding from presence. Life becomes less personal, more fluid, more compassionate. You are not separate from others. You recognize yourself in them. And in every moment, even the difficult ones, there is a quiet undercurrent of peace. Stillness is not a retreat from life. It is life in its most essential, unfiltered form. It allows you to meet each moment with clarity and grace, because you are no longer trying to control it. You are simply aware of it, and in that awareness you are whole. This is the essence of transcendence, not through climbing higher, but by sinking deeper, by being still, by being present, by allowing what is. In that sacred allowing, you remember who you are. And so, as we come to the quiet end of these reflections, let us not take these words merely as ideas, but as gentle invitations. Invitations to look within, not to analyze, not to fix, but to simply observe with honesty and openness. We have explored the nature of the false identity, how it arises through unconscious identification with thought, with story, with form. We've seen how this self, though persistent and convincing, is not who we truly are. It is a mask worn so long it begins to feel like skin, and yet beneath that mask there is something untouched, something that does not change with time or circumstance. It is not shaped by opinion or experience. It does not need to prove itself or defend itself. It is awareness, pure, still, and alive. This awareness is not a distant goal, but an ever-present reality. It reveals itself not through effort, but through surrender, through the simple willingness to be here, now, without clinging, without resisting. In that stillness, transformation occurs, not by force, but by grace. From the restless movements of the false identity, we return to the quiet of divine awareness, not as a belief, not as a destination, but as the living truth of our being. In this awareness, there is no separation, no striving, no fear. Only presence, only peace. The journey is not outward, it is inward, and the door is always open. Thank you for listening. not just with your mind, but with your presence.